Who am I? Who are you? One of the oldest and recurring questions that comes up for all of us at some point. There's three probable answers to that question. Probable in that they exist in language and we can come up with as many answers as we want. But the framework that I use is, first of all, we are the genetic software. We are the genetic software of energy, meaning over the billions of years that life has existed, our planet has formed in a spherical shape within a set of laws. And among all the different experiments that life has generated and co-created, amongst all the many different experiments, our form has joined the 1%, meaning 99.9% of all forms that have existed on this planet are now dramatically different in an almost unrecognizable form, or are no more. And what remains are the winners, the genetic codes, the genetic software that has proven most successful at responding to, adapting to, and collaborating with our ecology, our set of variables in our environment. And that's the genetic software, right? Because genes, matter, atom, they follow a software. It's not just random chaotic energy. There's a series of relationships that repeat following a code, the genetic code, to create the various animals, including the human animal and the human being. There's a code, there's a software that is self-replicating. So we are that software. Right? Now, within that software, right, within the last several million years in which the human being has existed, right? The human animal is the reptilian brain in an ape-like body, which at some point moves towards awakening to awareness of its own existence. That software on top, the consciousness software, which is on top of the genetic software, is also a part of who we are. So there's two layers of software. There's the genetic code, right? We can look at that as a bunch of zeros and ones and look at that in a variety of different languages. There's the genetic code. And then there's the operating system, right? You could think of that as the code of the computer. You know, when they manufacture computers in a factory today, there's only one reason that they're doing that. You know, if you buy a new laptop, for that new laptop to exist, thousands of different people have to believe in it. And by believe, they have to believe that that is a laptop that is more relevant than other laptops for at least a percentage of the population, or it doesn't get built. So that belief, that faith in the validity of the laptop, it starts with the investors. If the investors do not have faith, right, it may be an unfounded faith. Maybe they build a laptop and nobody buys it. Steve Jobs built Next. Nobody wanted a $10,000 computer at the time. So went out of business, right? There was faith. Steve Jobs had faith. Right? The companies that invested, the people that invested, they had faith. But it was an unfounded faith. It was a faith on false supposition. It was based on his success at Apple. So there has to be faith. Faith that good things will happen in the future. In this case, that someone will buy the laptop. And that's the basis of creating, right? Parents have to have faith when they decide to have a child. Parents have to have faith in themselves. They have to have faith in life. They have to have faith that they are capable of raising a child. And that's a good idea. And then a child is born. But that structure, going back to the laptop analogy, there's faith in the architecture. This seems like a good plastic casing based on this, this, and this. This seems like a good chip based on this, this, and this. This seems like a good battery. This seems like a good keyboard. This seems like a good peripheral. USB-C seems like a good port. There's faith in that has been built up and tested. And based on that faith, money, energy pours in to the company, to the factory, and an order is placed. There's also faith in the people, right, that can create that. And that's called the hardware, but it's really the software at a structural level. The plastic is software. You take this compound and that compound and that compound, and you organize it in a particular way to make that plastic manifest as software, the software of physics. Right? It's not just this pattern, and it's not a random pattern of those materials. The software is which materials, in what pattern. And that's called the hardware layer of software. And that represents the genetic layer of our body. But once the laptop is created, the next step is to load the software that we think of as software into the hardware. And that's a cultural phenomena, meaning you could write the code in a wide variety of different languages. And based on how that code is written, it will communicate with this device or that device, or it will not recognize, it will not cognize, it will not relate. And the culture, the cult in which we are born, determines what we can recognize, what we can see, based on this genetic hardware. The culture writes the code that says you're going to speak in this language. Now, as soon as you speak in a given language, you can only see that which exists within the language. There are paradigms, many of them, that do not yet exist, that we do not know that we do not know. Or maybe we know that we don't know them in the abstract. But we don't know that we don't know this particular paradigm. If we did, we would know the paradigm. Right? The only way that we can know that we didn't know it before, you can think of the paradigm of the shadow of the human psyche. It's a paradigm that has emerged in just the last few hundred years, the repressed, denied part of the psyche. And now that we have that paradigm, we can look in that region of the psyche. Right? If there's no paradigm of a deleted, a bin, the recycle bin, if there's no paradigm for that, the place where things are almost deleted, You delete them, but then you have to delete the recycle bin. That's a paradigm. A container for all the things you think you want to delete, but may want to recover later. That's a paradigm. If you don't know that you don't know it, never occurs to you. As soon as you have heard the word recycle bin, you can say, well, what's that? And they can say, well, it's this little thing on the desktop, and things go there when you need to clear off the desktop, but you might want to get them out of there later, right? So that's the recycle bin, and that's kind of, and that's built on another paradigm that didn't used to exist. Most of us have recycle bins in our house now, where we throw certain things, and we could get them out of there until we throw them in the trash out in the garage, and we could get them out of there until we throw them in the truck. We could get them out of there till we throw them in the landfill. We could get them out of there until they are retransformed, recycled into something else, right? And so we have this layer of cultural software that is framed in language, right? You need to have a word that marks a pattern. And the only patterns one marks in a cult are the things that the cult has decided to focus on, has decided to prioritize. And every cult throughout human history has decided to focus on different things for different reasons. Now, they all focus on food, right? Because without food, you're dead. There were cults that didn't focus on food, and they're dead, right? There were cults that didn't focus on drinking. They're dead. There are cults that didn't focus on medicine in any form, and they're dead, right? 99% of all forms that once occupied this planet are now dead. 99% of the structure of those forms, it's not just that 99% of the individuals that have existed are dead, it's also that 99% of the forms, right? Once upon a time, there were dinosaurs. They're now dead. Once upon a time, there were trees like this. They're now dead, right? So we're part of the 1% that exists now. But 99% of the cults, the cultures that once existed are also dead. The languages are dead. The ideas are dead. The beliefs are dead. The gods, the deities are dead. Right? The cult that once prayed and bowed to Zhao is dead. The language is dead. The paradigm is dead. And the deity only exists to the extent that you and I remember it, put it back together with language. But even now, who's Zhao, right? It's not a very real image, right? But there was a time when the entire cult put primary emphasis on Zhao as the primary deity. Now, the deity is the place to aim. You think of sin, missing the mark, right? Why is it in hunting vernacular? Why do you use missing the mark? Well, when hunting keeps you alive, and this is more so in snowy environments, right? If you're in Alaska, if you're near the North Pole, you don't survive by growing asparagus because it's dead. You survive on one condition. You survive if you hit the mark. What's the mark? In that case, an animal. A polar bear, perhaps. A walrus, a sea lion, right? Whatever lives in that environment is what the mark is, right? And that's definitely an animal when you get when you get into areas that the snow never thaws, right? So to hit the mark is to survive. To miss the mark is to sin, right? You sent your son out to get food for the family. He sinned. The family does not survive. Why? Because the deity, right? The deity is always the path forward within a given context, right? Once upon a time, the Christian deity was all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful. Why? Well, because if you knew everything, if you could do everything, if you could see everything, you would survive relative to those who knew nothing, right? And so we aim for the path forward. And our deity, constructed in tens of thousands of cults over time, in tens of thousands of languages over time, our deities are the path forward as conceptualized by a group of people around death who want to go forward, who want to evolve, who want to become something more. So to sin is to miss that. To miss what? The path forward. In this case, you take aim, you get the polar bear in sight. If you hit the right part of the polar bear at the right time, timing is also part of the mark, right? Well, I hit it, it just wasn't there anymore. That's part of it. But also, a hungry, angry polar bear that sees you, maybe better not to hit it at all if you want to go forward, if you want to survive. A young polar bear cub, it's questionable, right? What's the mother going to do? To hit the mark, to thrive, to survive, you've got to get the timing, right? A bear in hibernation, maybe you could get the 3 to 5 arrows you're going to have to get before it wakes up, right? Because hitting the mark is achieving the goal. And if the goal is to survive, you have got to hit the polar bear in the way that will incapacitate the polar bear to an extent that it dies before it kills you and before its family kills you. That's hitting the mark. Right? Before it leaves, that's hitting the mark. You've got to get the timing right in order to avoid sinning. To sin is to come home empty-handed and your family dies. That's to miss the mark. The deity is usually the embodiment of the target. So this all-powerful, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-doing, wrathful God, male, right? That's part of the deity a few thousand years ago. Male, because male bodies are stronger statistically than female bodies. So God is a male. Why? Because the tribe is progressing based on warfare and defense. Why? Well, that's just what's going on at that time, right? Other tribes are hunting other tribes. Right? Various leaders of this tribe are trying to conquer because that's one of the software. That's part of the cult software at the time. Who wins as a tribe? Who passes on the genetics and takes the tribe forward into the future? Either someone who's very good at hiding and defending, or someone who's good at conquest, they take the path forward. Right? So that's the code that's being embodied. So the deity God is a male, because at a time when physical stamina and hunting are a key focus, you want a man to hunt more than you want a female body to hunt. Right? And it's not that there weren't tremendous female warriors. There were, but statistically, the tribe did best when the men hunted, when the men went to war, and when the female raised the child. Now, some of that is just obvious delineation, right? Your tribe doesn't survive unless there are babies. Well, who's the best at that? Can you nurse a baby? Can you give birth to a baby and be in a battle? No, you can't, right? So in the specialization of labor, there was a time in the past where what appeared to be the pivotal point of whether this tribe survives or is consumed by these other tribes, sometimes literally, right? Because cannibalism was a thing, right? Before some external sense of morality comes in, well, you're hungry after a battle, right? Your enemy had some good energy, right? Or they couldn't have fought you. They nearly won, right? What better way to make sure they don't come back? Eat them, right? What better way to conserve energy from hunting? Eat them. All this dead meat going to waste. What a waste, right? We're not a wasteful tribe. Let's eat them, right? So the tribes that consumed or are consumed literally would fight to the death, and then the winner would eat the loser and have lots of meat, right? And so the battle was useful, right? Maybe you'd even eat your own tribe's people, be more efficient, right? And then the tribe that consumes or that preserves the meat for the longest period of time, well, smoking, drying, freezing. If you're in a northern or far southern environment, well, just freeze all this meat and then cook it later. Right? So there's a tremendous, there's a tremendous iteration, right? And so we move towards our deities. The deity is the way forward. We move towards our deities. If we look at the European influence and 2,000 years ago, the all-seeing, the all-knowing God, that's Google. In other words, we move towards our deities, we embody our deities, we become our deities over time because we aim for them. We invest energy to become more like what we think is the path forward. All-knowing, all-seeing, we're still doing that. That's still one of our gods, right? And gods take time to change because cults are very self-referential. They're very insular. It's part of their defense. We are this way because we are this way, and that's why we are this way. This is us. This is our identity. And the cult code is held, right? The biological identity, the biological software, is held in the genes, the genetic code. That's the software of matter. The cult software is in the identity We are this group. We eat these things. We talk like this. Our word for yes is yes. It's not that. It's not that. We are this one. So we have a cult code. And the cult code is the habit of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that is held in place by the majority. And we defend the cult code. Who do we defend it against? The other cults, but also the minorities, the deviants. Who are the deviants? They are the ones that are not adhering to the code. They are deviating from the code. Now, the code of every cult is part of the 1%. And so the code says, learn these things and you will survive. Be like us and you will survive. Be like us and you will be one of us. That's the code of the cult. That's normal. That's nominal. Why? Well, it's what everyone else is doing. That's all it means. You're on track. You're copying the code of the cult. Now, every genetic code is wrong. Right? We still have appendixes. They kill us. It's poor code. We consume vast amounts of energy, time, money, and natural resources to put ourselves in prison and then to guard the prison. That's wrong. That energy is not being spent to forward the cult. It's being spent to control destructive elements in the cult. Right? It would be more efficient to learn another part of code, right? Because we are layers of code, and that's the psyche. Psyche, the construct of identity, is also code at an individual and at a family level, at a more nuanced level than the cult. So the cult is downloaded into the brain through language by the age of 3, 4, 5, 6. By 7, we start to become aware of it. But we're also given the family code over time. Why? Well, because our family is part of the 1% that survived within the cult. Other families have died off. They were killed in a feud. They tried out being vegetarians in Alaska, and the diet didn't suit them. Right? Or they tried out being obese in the tropics, and that didn't suit them. Right? The code is constantly iterating, constantly bifurcating, constantly experimenting, and the 1% survive. The 1% survive. They go on, and they iterate. So, we are part genetic code. We're part cult code. We're part family code. But we're also a unique individual, meaning we have seen things that nobody else has seen, from perspectives, from angles that nobody else has seen because they weren't standing, right? If you stand here, you're going to see a view of this that you do not see if you stand here. Perspective, personal view. So every individual has a unique perspective. That perspective allows them to see things that nobody else sees, which allows them to think things that nobody else thinks, which allows them to feel things that nobody else feels, about things that nobody else understands. Right? So you have a bifurcation. I think we should do it this way based on this point of view. Well, I think we should do it this way based on this point of view. Right? And of course, the person back here thinks we should do it another way based on that point of view. Now, when you have a weak identity, a weak sense of I, that's the one that identifies, that attaches to one's personal experiences, one's personal thoughts, feelings, etc. This is where the phenomena of the bowling ball and the pinball come into being, right? As the bowling ball is going forward at 50 miles an hour and the pinball is going forward at 50 miles an hour. And the law of mass dictates that when the bowling ball and the pinball collide, the pinball goes flying because it's tiny, and the bowling ball continues because it's big. It's called the law of mass. Now, an infant is always tiny. And when a child, when an infant, even when a teenager, collides with its cult, with its culture, the individual, the child, is sent flying. Now, it's important to understand that the law of mass is the exact inverse of the law of intelligence, because the law of mass dictates that the larger object, that the majority knocks the minority out of the way. And this happens, right? How do you know who is treated the worst, who is dishonored the most in our cult? Well, you just look for the minority. You look for the pecking order that's in a sociopathic paradigm. But you also look for the smallest identity within the group. The group with the least power. That's another way of looking at the law of mass. The groups with the most power, which in our cult have traditionally been white males. Why male? Well, because that was woven into the deity, right? From as a carryover from the time when male bodies determined whether the women were safe or not. Meaning there was a time when if you were a woman and you had a strong male warrior partner who was willing to die to protect you, there was a time when that determined whether or not you lived. Meaning that all the women that did not have a strong, competent male warrior who was willing to die to protect them, those women died. And so the deity, the path forward, was a strong male body. So the tribe pivoted to protect, to nurture, to feed, to prioritize, to honor the strong male bodies. And the strongest men were at the top of the pecking order because they determined, meaning if you could have a strong enough leadership body, many tribes just wouldn't even attack. They'd say, what's the point? And there was peace with ease. So to have a group of those people up there, that was a good idea at the time, right? Now, times change. And another law says that the thing that once helped you survive will be the thing that kills you if you keep doing it as the environment changes. In other words, the same thing that helped you succeed at one point in time-space will destroy your success at another point in time-space. And that's the changing of the deities, right? But that takes effort, that takes energy to say, hey, let's reevaluate Like, are we still in the time, right? Well, not really, right? In the age of robotics and the age of information, right? It's no longer the big, strong males. So we've taken a turn towards the geeks. It's now the billionaires that make the difference. If you could have a billionaire, you'll be all right. If your country can have a lot of billionaires, you'll be all right. So the pivot has moved to the billionaires, and many of the billionaires are geeky. They're not big. They're not tall. They're not strong. They're good coders, right? So a cult, if it's intelligent, continues to move, but still a majority of the billionaires are men, right? And so we still have a period when the deities are male, right? So the deities were once Samson, were once Goliath, were once strong men that could win wars. And now the deities are tech-savvy billionaires who are often short, who are often thin, who often don't go to the gym, are often, frantic, mildly weird. They're the ones. Einstein played a role in winning World War II. Not very strong, not very masculine, right? And so the deity will change as people come to catch up and understand what is the way forward. That's a line of code, but it also, going back to the law of mass, it's important to understand that the law of intelligence is the inverse of the law of mass, because the law of intelligence says that every technology is adopted in a bell curve formation. And what that means is that the first person to come up with the idea of a cell phone was very, very tiny, with just one person. Someone came up with, probably a male in our cult, a male came up with a cell phone. So that's a great idea. I want a cell phone. I want a cell phone. Now, at that point, the most important idea of our time today, the cell phone, meaning the cell phone is the dominant technology in 2023. More people honor their cell phone than almost any other device. They honor it with their time, their money, their attention, right? Their prioritization. Oh, I've got to do this. Why? Because my phone said so. I got a message on my phone. I've got to do this and do this. At one point, there was only one person who says, I think we should have cell phones. And everyone else thought it was a bad idea. What's that? I don't have time for that, right? Then there were 3 people, right? Then there were 5 people, right? Then there were 10 people. And they managed to convince some investors. Now, everyone else said, what a dumb idea. There were jokes about it. The brick in the car, $1 a minute. Why don't you just wait till you get to the house, you fool? Right? There were jokes about it, right? Because all new adoption meets resistance. Why? And for good reason, because 99% of all the new ideas never happen. In part because they're resisted, and because many good ideas are not that good at that moment in time overall. Now, these are the most intelligent people in the entire cult, vis-a-vis or relative to a cell phone. These 5 people. They know more than the other billions of people. They are the wave of the future, and there's only 5 of them. Now, in time, there will be billions of cell phone users. It will become the new normal, right? Everyone will be doing it. The law, now, it's the big one. But what I'm saying is that all of the best ideas that exist today, the very, very best ideas that will exist in 100 years. They are contained within the most intelligent minority. So you have the law of mass, the majority always wins in a collision. And you have the law of intelligence, which says that these 5 people, a minority, are always more intelligent than a majority. The law of intelligence says that the most intelligent people on the planet in any given area are always a minority. So the minorities are the most likely to be bullied, to be marginalized through the law of mass, and the minority is the most statistically likely to be the most intelligent in any given moment. And so these are 2 bits of code, right? So if the minority is smart enough to evade and avoid the majority's effort to kill them, in this case, to kill their idea, right? You take your startup idea to a venture capitalist and they want to kill it. Well, how is that going to return me, how is that going to make me $1 billion? I don't know. Well, then you don't get any of my money. How are you going to do that faster than everyone else? I don't know. That's the honest answer, right? With any new idea, can you be sure that this cell phone will be adopted by 1 billion people? No, we cannot be sure. Can you be sure this will make me $1 billion? No, we cannot be sure about that. Well, why should I give you the money? Well, we think this is a good idea. Right? And most of the good ideas get killed in that round, right? Because perhaps the inventors are like me. They're not willing to lie. I think I have a great idea here. How's it going to make me $1 billion? I don't know. Will it make me $1 billion? Statistically, no. But it might. It might. It might. Right? The person who says, absolutely, there's no way in hell this isn't going to make you $1 billion, maybe that's a lie, by the way. Maybe gets the money. Right? But the person who's willing to lie too much to their investors may start to believe their lies. And when you believe lies, you can't see clearly. So maybe you fail, right? So it's a tricky thing, right? But this is all cult code. Right? This is the code of the cult, right? For example, politicians do not get elected unless they lie. It's just kind of what we talked about. So the only people we ever elect are liars. Right? Because when someone says, no, I'm not going to have much power, it really doesn't matter too much whether you elect me or somebody else. I'm not going to get much done. And I'm not going to put you first if I want to be elected, because the people who put you first don't get elected. The people who get elected sell themselves to various money interests. Because you don't think about the issues, you look at the advertisement. The advertisement determines how you feel about me, and you vote based on your feelings. So you decide that you vote for the people that feel good, and those are the people who spend the most money to make you feel good, and those are the advertisers. So we have a cult that elects liars that sell you short to make you feel good in the advertising, and then deny any mistakes and don't apologize. So those are the people you're going to get in that cult, right? That's called democracy. So you're going to get liars who are good at selling themselves and lying to as many people as possible, and then you vote for those people, and so those are the people you get, right? Because if someone comes up and says, yeah, I'm really not going to make that much headway, And I'm not even going to be elected, so just so you know, because I'm not going to sell myself to all these special interests. And you're not going to have heard of me, and you're too lazy to go read about all the people you haven't heard about, and so I'm not going to be elected. So I'm going around wasting everyone's time, including my own, because I'm not going to be elected in a cult that how much someone is known is a bigger variable in whether they get elected than how good their policies are. And how good their policies are is determined by how much they don't expect, that they don't accept special interest money that gets them elected. Right? So I'm going out there not to get elected in a game where you will punish me for being a good leader. Right? That's the code. Right? So, okay. Well, I guess why should I elect you if you're not going to be? Why should I vote for you? You're not going to be elected anyway. Right? Good question. So then we have the individual code, right? The individual perspective, based on observing that. Like, based on observing that, I have no intention to run for office. How about you, right? So that's a perspective. That's a bit of code on a bit of code on a bit of code. And the identity is the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. That I attaches to. That's me. That's me. I talk that way. How do you know? Well, I remember, meaning I take a recording in my mind of what I said yesterday, and I put it together in the present moment. It's called a memory, a remembrance. I remember and I say, yep, I sounded like that yesterday, and I still sound like that today. This is me. I looked like that yesterday. How do you know? Well, I looked in a mirror. I saw that face. I captured it in my memory. I took a photo in my memory. Now I look in the mirror and I compare it. I go back. Yeah, that's pretty close to me. That must be me. That's my face. This is my voice. I think that thought. How do I know it's my thought? Well, I thought it yesterday. I thought about it yesterday. I remember it yesterday. I put the energy of that thought together in words, a string of words. I still think that today. I thought it yesterday. Now I think about it today. That's me, right? So the I is the one that says, this is the me that thinks these thoughts, that feels these things. That's the identity. The identity is the pattern, and the I is the one that says, that pattern belongs to me. That's me. So the only thing between us and living a much happier life is our identity, and the I that is attached to our past identity. Right? We've been doing, our friends look at this. Why do you do that? You just keep sitting in front of the TV and eating sugar. You're fat. You're going to die. But that's me doing that. I think it's a good idea to sit rather than to go for a walk. And I think it's a good idea. Well, why don't you change that pattern? No, that's not me. This is me, right? We cling to our identity. I attach to my identity. It's my identity. That's me. Because that's who I was. And if I just suddenly changed, I wouldn't know who I was. Well, so the ego is very attached to who it is, who it identifies with. And so these are the code, the genetic code, the cult code, the ego code. These are the patterns. Now, what we are conscious of is how light looks, how reality looks as it flows through the pattern, right? So energy is constantly flowed through our pattern. Awareness, food, liquid, it goes through this pattern and it comes out different than it went in. Right? And that's what we're aware of. So we also have consciousness. This is the part that is aware of the pattern. It says, that's me. This is my body, my cult, my identity. And then we're also aware of what comes out the other side, right? If we didn't have eyes, reality would be very different. If our eyes had a blue lens, reality would look very different, right? So what we experience is energy passing through these layers of code and coming out in a particular way. Now you can think of electricity going into a computer, and based on the zeros and ones in the software, the screen looks blue, the screen looks white, the screen looks black. It's all based on the code. So energy goes in and it comes out consistent with the biological code, the cult code, the ego code, which include, of course, the five senses, right? If we had a sense that could measure empathy, we could see a graph. There's empathy over there. There's not empathy there. If we could see that on a 1 to 10 scale, right, we would be paying more attention to empathy. But, we don't have a graph. We don't have a sense that directly measures objective empathy, right? So there's plenty of people who care about that we say they don't care about us. There's other people that don't care about us and we say, oh, they really like us, right? We don't have a sense that measures the empathy in the space. If we did, our entire world would change. Because obviously it makes more sense to pivot towards people that actually do care about us and away from those that don't, but are lying to secure more power. So this then is the output, right? This is the output that we can then measure. And most of us make the mistake of pretending that that's the way reality is, as opposed to that's the reality that is created by this genetic code. And that's the environment created by the influence of these different identities, these different codes. So this is who we are. Now, we are also, right? So this is all in the prism, in the pattern, in the code, and it has limitations. But we are also the one who watches. We are also the one who is beyond the identities, the code. We are presence. We are awareness. Before and after language, before and after body, before and after cult, before and after ego, after I. We are awareness, the wordless presence that comes through but is not limited by. And this is called the self with a capital with a capital S, because it's bigger than the code. A Maori warrior 20,000 years ago also could enter a transcendent state and feel one with all things and transcend all things. Feel one with the body and transcend the body. There is a sense, an ineffable sense, an unspeakable sense of awareness that is more than the code. And in a materialistic cult, in an addictive cult, in an ego-obsessed cult, many of us do not meet the self that is with us the entire time. It cannot be put into words. That is more. It's more than life. It's more than death. It's more than words. It cannot be captured in words. It is that which is present, wordlessly, timelessly, spacelessly, and which we can connect with, open to, open with. We are that as well.